Welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be looking at Chapter 2 of the Resilient Futures Handbook.
Yeah.
It's all about preparing for some of the worst-case scenarios, predictions from the World Economic Forum. You shared this chapter with us, and it definitely doesn't shy away from those difficult possibilities.
Right.
It can get a bit intense, but we're going to break down the key points, highlight those important takeaways, and maybe even share some practical steps that anyone listening can take to build up their own resilience. Sound good?
Sounds great.
Perfect.
And it's great that you're starting with Chapter 2 because they do a really nice job of sort of laying out their methodology before they kind of get into the nitty-gritty of that, worst case scenario.
Yeah, it's like they set the stage, right?
Yeah.
And they jump into this thing called scenario planning, which I have to admit I wasn't super familiar with before reading this, but it seems like a pretty vital tool when you're trying to wrap your head around something as complex and uncertain as the future. So what are your thoughts on that? What is this scenario planning all about?
Well, you hit the nail on the head when you said complex and uncertain. Scenario planning is all about envisioning multiple possible futures, right?
Okay.
And the key here is that it's not about predicting the future with absolute certainty.
Right.
It's more about exploring different pathways based on all these different forces that are at play. Things like climate change, obviously a big one, but also like technological advancements, geopolitical shifts.
Oh, yeah.
All of that.
So it's kind of like creating a choose-your-own-adventure story for the world.
Exactly.
Okay.
But with, a much more serious tone.
Yeah, a little less fun, maybe.
Yeah. But by playing out those what-if scenarios, it forces us to think more critically about the potential consequences of different choices and actions that we take. And in a way, I think it makes us more adaptable, right? Less likely to be blindsided by the unexpected.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's not about eliminating uncertainty altogether, but it's more about becoming more comfortable with it and learning how to navigate it strategically.
You got it.
I see.
And what's fascinating is that this isn't some fringe concept, you know? This is something that businesses use all the time to make strategic decisions. Governments use it to develop policies.
Oh, wow.
And even cities are increasingly incorporating it into their urban planning, especially when it comes to preparing for climate change.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So scenario planning, it's like having a flashlight in the dark.
Yeah.
Illuminating different potential paths and helping us make more informed decisions along the way.
That's a great way to put it. It's about proactively shaping the future, not just passively reacting to it.
Right. Okay, so enough with the theory.
Yeah.
Let's get to what I really wanted to explore, which is that worst case scenario they outline in Chapter 2.
Okay, well, brace yourself, because it's not exactly a walk in the park. The handbook dives into the bleakest possibilities, really focusing on what happens if current trends continue unchecked. No intervention, no course correction, just kind of business as usual.
Right. And they kick things off by talking about this cascade of environmental risks. What exactly are we talking about here?
Well, think like scorching heat waves, multi-year droughts, these monster storms, right? We're not just talking about a gradual increase in temperature here. It's about these extreme events becoming both more frequent and more intense.
Yeah.
And as we've seen with the El Nino event this year, these extremes can really wreak havoc on our planet, causing all sorts of disruption and displacement.
Yeah, absolutely. And they specifically call out rising sea levels. This sounds particularly concerning for coastal cities.
Absolutely. They highlight these megacities, Mumbai, Lagos, Jakarta, which are not only densely populated, but they're also highly vulnerable to rising sea levels. So we're talking potential inundation, mass displacement of people, economic devastation. It's pretty intense.
That's terrifying.
Yeah.
So many lives and livelihoods at stake, and we're already witnessing this in some parts of the world, right?
Precisely. It's no longer a distant threat. This is unfolding in real time. And the scary part is that this is just one piece of the puzzle. They go on to paint this picture of a global food crisis triggered by these climate extremes, right? So crops are failing, food prices skyrocketing, and the existing cost of living crisis is only getting worse.
Yeah, it's unsettling to think about. I mean, the ripple effects of these environmental risks could be catastrophic.
Yeah, and that's where things start to take a truly dystopian turn. The chapter goes on to describe a world on the brink of complete economic instability and even societal collapse.
Wow, that's a heavy thought. Help me unpack that. What would that even look like?
Imagine a domino effect. Okay, so climate impacts trigger agricultural failures, which leads to supply chain breakdowns, soaring energy prices.
Oh, wow.
And then all of these factors combine to fuel a global recession, unlike anything we've ever seen before. So jobs disappear, poverty spreads like wildfire, and governments are struggling to provide even basic services as their tax revenues plummet.
So basically, the very foundation of society begins to crumble.
Yeah.
And where does technology fit into all of this? Is it a savior or a villain in this scenario?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting. The handbook presents technology as a double-edged sword. It can both exacerbate these risks and also alleviate them.
Okay.
So on the one hand, it highlights all of these advancements in things like renewable energy,
Right.
early warning systems for natural disasters,
Yeah.
and even some innovative agricultural techniques.
So there's hope that technology can help us adapt.
Oh, there's definitely potential there.
Okay.
But, and this is a big but, there's also a darker side to consider. This scenario really highlights the increasing risk of cyber attacks
Yeah.
on critical infrastructure. So think power grids, hospitals, financial systems, all the things that keep society functioning.
If those were to be crippled, it'd be unimaginable.
Exactly. If those systems were to be crippled by a large-scale cyber attack,
Yeah.
the chaos and societal breakdown would be unimaginable.
And they also bring up the digital divide.
Yeah.
That gap between those who have access to technology and those who don't.
Yeah.
And how it would only get worse in this scenario.
Exactly, meaning those without access are left even further behind, which of course exacerbates social tensions
Right.
and makes it even harder to address these interconnected crises.
Yeah, it's all connected.
Yeah.
And this brings us to the final piece of this bleak puzzle.
No.
Geopolitics.
Yes. Global power dynamics, can't forget about those.
Exactly. So in this worst case scenario, what happens on that front?
Well, resource scarcity becomes a major flashpoint.
Okay.
Imagine conflicts erupting over water, arable land, energy sources. And this would be particularly acute in regions already stressed by climate change.
So basically, international cooperation crumbles under the weight of all of these pressures.
Yeah, it's not a pretty picture. The handbook paints a world where trust evaporates, agreements are ignored, and every nation adopts this me-first mentality.
Every nation for itself. Not exactly a recipe for effective global solutions.
Exactly. The lack of cooperation would make it nearly impossible to tackle these challenges on a global scale, further deepening the crisis.
Okay, well, this has been a pretty intense deep dive into the dark side of the future. It's a lot to process.
It definitely is. But remember, this is just one potential scenario.
Right,
And it's based on the assumption that current trends continue unchecked.
right.
The goal here isn't to paralyze you with fear, but to empower you with knowledge so that you can take action.
Okay, that's reassuring. So what are the key takeaways from this scenario, and what actions can we take to build resilience in the face of these potential threats?
That's precisely what we'll explore in the next part of our deep dive. Great. It's not all doom and gloom. There's actually a lot we can do both individually and collectively to mitigate these risks and build a more resilient future.
Well, that worst-case scenario really lays out the stakes, doesn't it? It's a stark reminder of what we're up against if we don't act.
No kidding. Giant wake-up call for sure. But you mentioned there's still hope, that there are things we can do to shift course.
Absolutely. And that's where Chapter 2 gets really interesting. It shifts from outlining the problem to exploring solutions.
Yeah.
And one of the big takeaways is that preparation is key.
Okay, that makes sense. But when we're talking about something as massive and complex as global societal collapse,
Yeah.
where do we even begin to prepare?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And the handbook does a great job of breaking it down into manageable pieces. One of the key takeaways is that resilience isn't just about individual preparedness, it's about building strong, adaptable communities.
So it's about working together, pooling resources, supporting each other. You got it. And I think that's something that's often overlooked, in our individualistic culture. The handbook highlights the importance of strong community networks, things like neighborhood associations, mutual aid groups, local resilience initiatives. It's about fostering a sense of shared purpose and responsibility, recognizing that we're all in this together.
It takes a village, right?
Exactly.
We can't just rely on ourselves or even the government to solve these massive problems.
Exactly. These networks create a platform for sharing information, sharing resources, skills, all of which becomes incredibly valuable when facing any kind of crisis.
Right.
And even more importantly, they can help address some of the root causes of vulnerability within a community.
So it's more than just responding to emergencies. It's about building resilience from the ground up.
Exactly. Imagine a community garden, right?
Okay.
That helps enhance food security. Or skill sharing workshops that empower residents to take care of themselves and their neighbors. Or even something as simple as a neighborhood watch program that can significantly improve safety.
Yeah, it creates this web of support that strengthens the entire community, makes it more resilient to any challenge.
I'm with you there. And think about how crucial these networks become in the face of a large-scale crisis, like a natural disaster or a major economic downturn.
Right.
When external support systems are stretched thin, it's the community that has to step up.
Okay, so community networks, crucial. What else does the handbook recommend?
Well, it also emphasizes the importance of community preparedness initiatives.
Uh-huh.
This involves developing a comprehensive plan that outlines everything from identifying potential risks to establishing communication protocols, even designating safe havens. So everyone knows what to do and where to go in an emergency, even if communication systems are down.
Right, so everyone's on the same page.
Exactly. And it's not just about having a plan on paper, it's about regular practice. Think community-wide drills, training sessions for first responders, even just sharing preparedness tips with your neighbors.
Building a culture of preparedness where everyone understands the importance of being ready for the unexpected.
I like that. A culture of preparedness.
Yeah.
It's about shifting our mindset from complacency to proactivity.
Right. Okay, so we've talked about communities, but what about individuals?
Yeah.
What can we do as individuals to enhance our own resilience?
Well, the handbook dives deep into personal and household preparedness, offering a range of practical tips and strategies. It starts with building an emergency kit.
Oh, yeah, the classic emergency kit.
Stocked with essential supplies, food, water, first aid, tools, anything else you might need to survive for at least 72 hours.
Okay, so being prepared to be self-sufficient for a few days in case of any kind of disruption.
Right. But the handbook goes beyond just the physical stuff.
Oh.
It also stresses the importance of having a mental preparedness plan.
A mental preparedness plan. What does that look like?
Well, it's about acknowledging that emergencies are going to be incredibly stressful.
Right.
So it's about having coping mechanisms in place, whether that's practicing relaxation techniques, having a support network to connect with, maybe even having a therapist to talk to.
So taking care of our mental and emotional well-being is just as important as having all the canned goods.
Absolutely, because in a crisis, it's our mental resilience that's going to determine how well we navigate the challenges and support those around us.
Okay, that makes sense. What about the financial side of things? How can we build financial resilience?
Well, the handbook really hammers home the importance of having an emergency fund. This is money set aside specifically for unexpected expenses, like a sudden job loss or a medical emergency. It's that financial cushion that can prevent a difficult situation from becoming a full-blown crisis.
Right, so you're not completely derailed if something unexpected happens.
You nailed it. They recommend having at least 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses saved up in that emergency fund.
Okay. I can imagine some people hearing that and thinking, easier said than done.
I hear you. It can seem daunting. But even small, consistent contributions over time, they really do add up. And honestly, the peace of mind that comes with having that financial safety net, that's priceless.
So emergency fund, check. What else can we do to kind of bolster our financial resilience?
Well, they recommend taking a good hard look at your debt. High-interest debt, like credit card debt, can really weigh you down, especially during times of economic uncertainty. So paying down debt as much as you can is a key step.
So it's about getting your financial house in order, so to speak.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just eliminating debt.
Okay.
It's about developing basic financial literacy, learning how to budget, how to save, how to invest wisely. The more control you have over your finances, the better equipped you'll be to navigate any economic storm that comes your way.
Okay, so we've covered community networks, emergency plans, personal preparedness, financial resilience. Anything else?
Oh, there's more. It also dives into the world of self-sufficiency skills, especially those that could be valuable in a world where supply chains are disrupted or essential services become unreliable. Things like gardening, food preservation, basic home repairs, even first aid and wilderness survival skills.
This is where we get into the Little House on the Prairie stuff.
Right? Well, maybe not that extreme.
Okay.
But it's about becoming more hands-on and self-reliant, able to take care of ourselves and our families if those systems we rely on were to break down.
Right, it's like having a backup plan for your backup plan.
Exactly. It's about being adaptable and resourceful.
This has been a whirlwind of information. I mean, we've covered so much ground already, from community organizing to financial planning to self-sufficiency skills. But we haven't really talked about the role of technology in all of this?
That's a great point, and it's something the handbook addresses directly. It acknowledges that technology can be both a powerful tool for resilience and a potential source of vulnerability.
Technology, huh? It's a bit of a wild card in all of this, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, think about it. Technology connects us, informs us, and gives us access to all these vital resources.
Right.
Which are incredibly valuable, especially during a crisis, right? We've talked about things like early warning systems for natural disasters, online platforms for coordinating aid, and the ability to connect with loved ones even when you're physically separated.
Yeah. It's like this powerful tool that can amplify our resilience efforts.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling there's a but coming.
There is. The handbook also points out that this reliance on technology also makes us vulnerable to disruptions.
Yeah.
Imagine a major power outage or a large-scale cyber attack that basically cripples the internet.
Yeah.
Suddenly, all those tools that we depend on, they become useless.
Right. It's like we're building this house of cards on a foundation of technology that could be pulled out from under us at any moment.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. And that's why the handbook urges us to think about backup systems, offline resources, not putting all of our eggs in the digital basket, so to speak.
So using technology strategically, but not becoming overly dependent on it. Finding that balance.
Exactly. And that's where this concept of digital preparedness comes in.
Digital preparedness. Okay, tell me more about that.
Well, think of it like a digital version of your emergency preparedness plan. It's about backing up important data, securing your online accounts, knowing how to communicate offline, and having a plan in case of cyber attacks or data breaches.
So we need to be just as prepared for digital disruptions as we are for physical ones.
Precisely. And just like with physical preparedness, staying informed is key. Cybersecurity is constantly evolving, so it's important to be aware of the latest threats, the best practices. Think cybersecurity awareness training, keeping your software up to date, using strong passwords, and being cautious about phishing scams.
So it's like we need to develop these good digital hygiene habits, just like we have physical hygiene habits to stay healthy.
That's a great way to think about it. It's about being proactive and taking responsibility for our digital security.
Okay, so we've talked about mitigating the risks, but what about using technology proactively to actually build resilience?
That's where things get really exciting. The handbook highlights all sorts of cool possibilities. Imagine communities using technology to map risks, track resources, coordinate volunteers, and share vital information during emergencies.
So it can be a powerful tool for community organizing and disaster response.
Absolutely. And on an individual level, think about using technology to learn new skills, connect with support networks, access information about sustainability, self-sufficiency.
It's like technology can be this amazing amplifier, helping us to learn, grow, and connect in ways that wouldn't be possible otherwise.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's about tapping into the power of technology to empower ourselves and our communities.
As we've been talking about all of this, I've realized something. We've covered community resilience, individual preparedness, financial security, technology, the list goes on and on. But we haven't really addressed one really crucial aspect of resilience.
And what's that?
The human element, the internal resilience. That allows us to face adversity, adapt to change, and maintain hope even in the darkest of times.
You're talking about the resilience of the human spirit, that inner strength that allows us to overcome challenges and bounce back from setbacks.
Exactly. Because it's not just about having a well-stocked emergency kit or knowing how to grow your own vegetables. It's about cultivating that inner strength, that mental fortitude to weather any storm.
I completely agree. The handbook focuses mainly on external threats, practical preparations. But true resilience runs much deeper. It requires a resilient mindset.
So how do we cultivate that kind of inner strength? It sounds a little, esoteric.
It might sound that way, but there are a number of practices that can help. Mindfulness, for example, can be incredibly powerful. It's about being present in the moment, noticing your thoughts and feelings without judgment, and that can help to reduce anxiety and improve your ability to cope with stress.
So being aware of what's happening internally as opposed to getting swept away by your reactions to what's happening externally?
Right. And then there's gratitude, even in the face of adversity. It might seem counterintuitive, but focusing on what we're grateful for can really shift our perspective, helping us to appreciate the good things in our lives even when things are tough.
Choosing to focus on the light instead of getting lost in the darkness.
Exactly. And we can't forget the power of connection, surrounding ourselves with loved ones, building strong relationships, fostering a sense of community. All of that provides an invaluable support system.
That reminder that we're not alone in this, that we're all in this together.
You got it. We're social creatures. We thrive on connection and support. And sometimes just talking to someone who understands can make all the difference in the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And let's not forget the importance of self-care. Making time for those activities that bring us joy, nourish our souls, help us recharge. All of that can be incredibly powerful in building resilience.
I wholeheartedly agree. Whether it's spending time in nature, pursuing a creative hobby, or simply taking a break from the constant barrage of information, self-care allows us to replenish our energy and face challenges with renewed strength.
It's like filling up your own cup so you have something to give to others.
Well said. And I think this brings us to a really important point that the handbook only hints at: the ethical dimensions of resilience.
Ethical dimensions, what do you mean by that?
Well, resilience isn't just about survival at any cost, right?
Right.
It's about navigating these challenges in a way that aligns with our values and principles.
So it's not just about me surviving, it's about us surviving.
That's a great way to put it. We need to ask ourselves, what kind of future are we building? And what are we willing to sacrifice to get there? Resilience without compassion, empathy, a sense of justice, it's not truly resilient, it's just mere survival.
It's like building a fortress that protects some, but leaves others outside to fend for themselves.
Exactly, and that's not the kind of future we want to create.
This has been an incredible journey. We started by exploring a pretty bleak scenario, but we ended up, I think, with a sense of hope and a toolkit full of strategies for building a more resilient future.
It's been quite a deep dive, and I think the biggest takeaway for me is this. Resilience is not just about preparing for the worst. It's about building a better future for everyone.
I couldn't agree more. It's about recognizing our interconnectedness, our shared humanity, and our collective responsibility to create a world that's truly resilient, sustainable, and just.
And that's a future worth fighting for.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave everyone listening with this final thought. As you continue on your journey toward building resilience in your own life, in your community, remember that it's not just about what you do, but also about who you become. Cultivate that resilient mindset, nurture your connections, and never lose sight of your values. Because the future is not something that happens to us, it's something we create together. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.